Vinyl Friday, where I go through my records in alphabetical order like a big nerd and talk about why I love them, except not this week, because this week is a Beatles week. Before I forget, there will be an update about the paper mache yellow submarine at the end of the episode. Maybe I should make a paper mache yellow submarine. But I want to start talking about the music first. Today we're listening to a song that John Lennon described as, and I quote, "one of my throwaways, fancy paper around an empty box." Critics, and I, would beg to differ. AllMusic's Thomas Ward called it one of the finest on Revolver. Rolling Stone's Rob Sheffield called it one of his, presumably John's, best songs ever. Phil Collins of boom 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 fame said it's one of the best songs ever written, and it's only a minute and a half long. This is the song. So clearly we all know what a poor judge of his own songs John Lennon is, because this song's great. Nobody really knows what this song is about, because John Lennon never elaborated, and given his empty box comment, it's clear that he didn't think it was very important. But theories abound. Some people think it's about Paul McCartney, others think it's about Mick Jagger, his bird who can sing being merry and faithful, but that's debunked because they didn't get together until later in 1966, well after this album had come out. My favorite theory is that it's about Frank Sinatra and his bird, which allegedly is what he called his... What do you see when you turn on the light? Allegedly. I don't want the mob coming after me. If you think that you know what the song is about, let me know in the comments. But ultimately, I'm not going to spend too much more time speculating about the so-called throwaway lyrical content of the song, because what you find if you look behind the lyrics is a truly incredible piece of music. The song not only shows us a four-part machine, well-oiled and running flawlessly, it also shows us a collective of four musicians who are evolving faster than they ever have. Indeed, they may be evolving faster than any band, any musician ever has. Ever. It's not necessarily my favorite song on the album, although I love every song on this album, so don't misunderstand me there. I do love this song. One of the things I love most about this song, though, is that in it I think you can draw a direct line from their humblest beginnings through to their future output. This song is a story about the past, present, and future of this band. That may sound like a lofty claim, but bear with, I'm going to do my best to back that up with substance. Mainly so that I don't end up raving without direction for the next 20 minutes. I would first like to look at the use of musical motifs in the song, and then I would like to track the song's development from its inception through to this wondrous, polished, finished product that we can enjoy with our ear holes today. Whew! Let's start already! An English academic named Toby Litt said that if you slowed the song down, it would sound like a Bach chorale. I'm not sure if I would go so far as to say that, but I will concede that there are a lot of elements of this song that harken back to classical music traditions. Maybe unintentionally, although Paul was listening to a lot of classical music at the time, so who knows. I'll show you what I mean. This may not be your favorite thing to do, but it is critical to my argument, so let's have a listen to Mozart's Sonata No. 16 in C major. It sounds like this. In this piece, there's a little arpeggiated run that closes off one section. It sounds like this. But that's not the last you hear of it. It's also brought back later in the song, but in a minor key, like this. And then it's revisited throughout the song as it moves through different keys. Here's another one. At the beginning of the song, we hear a number of scales being played to great musical effect, like this. It's brought back in the next section, but slightly altered, like this. And then later again in the piece. In essence, what's happening here is that the composer has landed on a musical idea that really tickles his fancy. And so he's weaving it in and out through the song so that it becomes sort of self-referential. Each time it comes around, as a listener, you can go, oh, I recognize that from this part. When it's done well, it's quite clever. And I think that's what the Beatles are doing on And Your Bird Can Sing with that guitar riff. Guitar correspondent, please? Now, this is, of course, the riff in question. It's played by George and Paul. This is the lower part. And this is the higher part. But that's the riff in its entirety. It's actually used in a variety of ways throughout the song. It's first teased in the song's very brief introduction, Anchor if you don't mind. That's only the first half of it. At the end of the first verse, we get another little taste. It's brought back in an entirely different iteration during the bridge. When your prized possessions start to weigh you down. Until finally the whole thing is unfurled in its full glory. Before it stutters to a close at the end of the song. Leaving us feeling slightly unresolved. Maybe because we don't know what the song's about. Stop trying to eat the microphone. Yeah, I love you too. Truly, this riff, I think, is the backbone of the song. It's beautifully interwoven, it's incredibly melodic, it's well executed. This harmonized guitar thing became quite a trend in the early to mid-70s, and I do have to wonder whether this wasn't the inspiration for Thin Lizzy. Boston. The Allman Brothers. The Eagles. In the case of the Eagles, probably because Joe Walsh, a guitarist of the Eagles, was at a party years later, and he told Ringo Starr, who oddly enough was his brother-in-law, that as a child he had spent weeks working on playing this riff, and he thought that George Harrison was some sort of guitar genius for being able to play that, only to have Ringo say, actually it's George and Paul playing together, it's not one guitarist, it's two. So maybe that's where they got the idea for this. In any case, this harmonized guitar part is one of those musical motifs. It's an idea, a theme that is being toyed with, that's being introduced at this part, twisted and morphed and turned into something else that they use in this part, and something else that's used here. It is a tool to help tell the song's story, which I think is really cool. Speaking of harmony, let's use this as an excuse to digress and fangirl about the harmonies on this song a little bit. So much for my tidy outline. In several Beatles songs, their fantastic three-part vocal blend is used as the main feature of the song. You can hear it in songs like This Boy wants you back again. Yes It Is. Yes It Is, it's true. Nowhere Man. He's a real nowhere man. If I Needed Someone. If I needed someone. That's not what they're doing with this song. They're using it as an accent more than as a feature. It adds these little pops of brightness to lift the verses, like this. One voice. Boom! 3 voices! One voice. Boom! 3! Why do they sound that good when they sing together? Is it because John and George have that slightly nasal tone to their voices and that blends them really well with Paul's slightly throatier, slightly breathier tone? Is it because their 3 harmonies work really well with their ranges, with Paul singing usually on top and John and George swapping around the middle parts. I don't know why it is, but suffice to say, when those three voices come together, their individual attributes kind of fall away and make room for this new fourth thing, a sound entirely unto itself, unlike any of the individual three parts it's comprised of. Spectacular! A+, Beatles! There's one other pattern that I'd like to highlight on this song, and that is descending melody lines. We first hear it in the riff. It's a little bit lower each time. In that bridge part, the same thing happens with the riff. The top note descends like this. Meanwhile, the bass is highlighting those descending top notes with its own riff. We'll have the bass correspondent show you. And while we're on the bass, its melody is also descending at the ends of the verses. Perhaps the most obvious example, these beautiful backing vocals in the final verse. The harmonies have moved up, and those top two are cascading downwards like this. This is the highest one. Tell me that you heard every sound there is. And then the next one down is doing this. Tell me that you heard every sound there is. The bass is right there underneath it, highlighting that same descent. I don't think that's an arrangement accident. I think that that is an arrangement decision. To take one idea and then pepper it throughout the song in different orientations in different ways. It is such clever arranging, it is such clever songwriting. It demonstrates their increasing maturity and skill as composers, as songwriters. And what's even cooler is that we can see this process unfolding if we listen to the track through the different stages in its production. So let's do that. This is what the earliest recorded version of this song sounds like. Tell me that you got everything you want, and your bed can sing. It's got that 12-string Rickenbacker. So it's got what is by 1966 a very birdsy sound. It's a moderate tempo, some fantastic bass work by Paul McCartney. I especially like this moment. And they've maintained a two-part harmony throughout the verse. You say you've seen 7 wonders. The problem here is that I think largely because of that Rickenbacker, this track sounds like something that's already been done not only by the Beatles themselves, but by other bands. So they move on to this version. You tell me that you've got everything you want, and your bird can sing. It's a lot more rock and roll. That second harmony in the verse has dropped away. You say you've seen 7 wonders. They've distorted the guitars. Yes, good choice. And Paul's playing a much more traditional rock and roll bass line. Side note, how skillful a bassist is Paul McCartney that he can produce 3 astounding bass lines for the same song? Incredible. They've tidied up the riff a little bit. It's a lot cleaner. They've introduced some new parts at the middle 8. When your prized possessions. Backing vocals are a lot tighter, they're a lot more clipped and clean. And your bird can swing, and your bird can sing. But they do employ the same backing vocals that they used on If I Needed Someone. So they move on to this version. Our final version. They've sped it up. You tell me that you've got everything you want, and your bird can swing, but you can't hear me. Band sounds really tight. This might sound very nitpicky, but it's these little details that make the Beatles sound as tight as they do. They have perfectly aligned the way that they open and close the phrases that they're singing together. Nobody is coming in a little bit late or a little bit early. Nobody's holding on to a note longer than anybody else. They are all doing exactly the same thing. I'll point this out and you'll never be able to unhear it. In some recordings, when singers sing together, they don't align their S sounds. And if the letter S isn't perfectly synchronized, it will go s. And again, it sounds super nitpicky, but you don't get to sound like this without practicing those things, without eliminating those little things that make you sound a little bit less tight as a band. So instead of hearing, and your bird can sing, their three voices sound like one instrument. They've taken that riff that we thoroughly dissected earlier in the episode, and they've given it distinct parts for the introduction, for the ends of the phrases of the verses, for the bridge, for the outro. So they're consolidating these motifs and they're putting them to use in their song. Their groove is consistent. Those two guitar parts that are harmonizing are locked in. Much like the vocals, it sounds like a single instrument, as Joe Walsh mistakenly thought, because the beginnings and ends of the phrases perfectly line up. This is the kind of telepathy that a band can only achieve if they put in their 10,000 hours to playing together. This is where Hamburg pays off. This is where years of grueling tours pay off. Their shared history as a group underscores every single moment in this song. It's polished, it's professional, and when you listen to these three versions together, you can hear a group of musicians who are rejecting what has already been done. They are stretching themselves to do better than the last and to expand the bounds of their own creativity. It's a display of their growing maturity, and it predicts the music to come. The Beatles are exploring musical concepts on this song to a greater extent than they ever have before, and in a matter of months they'll extend that line of thinking to an album as a whole, which is arguably the first concept album in rock history. And that's why, to me, this could be the Beatles at their peak. They're experienced, but they are exploding with creativity and with a drive to innovate. So you see, And Your Bird Can Sing. It's a map of the Beatles' past, their present, and their future. Ta-da! It's also a damn good song. And maybe more than that, they're also still having a good time. To me, there is no better example of that than the outtakes of this track. They're somewhere in the middle of the second take of this song, and John and Paul are hit with an attack of the giggles.
You tell me that you've got the thing you want. You can't see me. That was it, wasn't it?
And to me, that is just a delight to listen to. They're still friends, and they're just having the best time. That's almost it for me. Before we go, I finished the submarine! Here it is! It's done. Thanks again to those of you who made donations in order to get me to make this damn thing. I had a great time making it. If you enjoyed this episode or would like to support any of the weird things I do, I'll leave a link in the description for my Buy Me a Coffee page, where you are welcome to make a donation, but no pressure, friends. Thanks for hanging out with me. I'll see you here next week. Have a great weekend! I'm so sorry, Editor Nancy. I'm a little bit tired today. I stayed up too late reading. I'm sorry. This song shows us. Each time it hits each time that hit, oh my god. And the second is, what is the second? Yeah, of course this is a song that you like. It's about birds. You love birds. God, this is an upbeat song.